Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Wright, coming to you from the beautiful, warm, and sunny confines of Atlantic City, New Jersey. And wherever you may be, whether coming to and from work, picking up the kids, or just on your daily commute, I thank you for wherever you may be listening. As always, like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel. And we're going to get right into it, guys. This is episode 9. It's a jam-packed episode. We're going to go off the NBA playoff games. 32 teams in 13 days. As you know, we're going over the Eagles, Browns. We're also going to go over the Dolphins. We're going to go over a couple teams, wrapping up that first round of the playoff losing teams. And then we're going to go into the divisional round, conference, and Super Bowl to wrap up. Tomorrow's the draft. As I stated in several episodes, I'm not sure if you guys, everyone had caught it, but just so you know, I'm going to do a live stream after the draft tomorrow night. Just for going over the first round. I'm going to do this for day 1 and day 2. Just going over the picks for rounds day 1 and 2, and just what I've seen off the visits and what I've seen the teams look at. And I'm going to do a very in-depth analysis. I'll be up burning the midnight oil, y'all. Really checking to see if how everything works out and how everything shaped out as far as the visits and what the teams actually selected. So it's going to be very interesting. It's a fun time. I love the draft, and nice thing to see, young men, changing their lives and becoming wealthy and, creating generational wealth for their families is always a great thing to see. Having said that, we're going to get started talking about the NBA playoffs. We're going to go into Wolves versus Suns. Another hot game for the Wolves. They got started early. It just seems like watching the series, they have the pulse of what Phoenix is trying to do. Obviously, because Phoenix doesn't have a damn bench, so, that kind of helps. But you give it to the Suns. You turn the ball over way too damn much. And then early in the game, the turnovers. I get it. It's loud. You're trying to focus. Guys don't hear well. It was just bad ball movement, bad sloppy-ass turnovers. Just bad. Just bad basketball. Having said that, Eric Gordon had it going. They needed him. Because God knows they didn't get shit else from their bench. They needed him. Bradley Beal didn't have a great game. But he did look, for the first time in a while, aggressive. He looked like he tried to be assertive. I will give him that. And that's the most I could give him, because 14 points, that ain't, Bradley Beal's done more than that. It's just not enough. Booker was active and aggressive. Obviously, he was a leading scorer too with 20 points, but they don't have a bench to beat this team. I mean, keep this in mind, y'all. Anthony Edwards wasn't even at his best, and it wasn't even like it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. Looking at it, Durant had 18 and 6. As I touched on, Booker had 20 points, 5 assists. Bill, 14 points, 6 rebounds. Eric Gordon with 15 points, 3 or 5 from 3. Like I said, all of it was needed, even though it was a loss. Every last one of it was needed and counted. Outside of Eric Gordon, though, the bench gave you 13 points. This series is over. Charles Barkley caught a lot of hell on the internet and on TV because he said this team was going to be out of it. I need y'all to know that man was accurate. This team, even if they win 2 games, they're not winning this series. They don't even have the bench to compete. And just keep this in mind. All 5 of the Wolves starters were in double figures. And then they had McDaniels, who had the game of his life, 25 points. And then the bench gives you 17. So you're getting outscored on the starting 5. You're getting outscored on the bench. Please tell me the math. The math ain't mathing, y'all. How you winning? So, like I said, it's going to be very interesting looking at the rest of that series. Like I said, I believe that game is tonight too, so we'll definitely have analysis going forward on that. But having said all that, Bucks versus Pacers, game 2. Dame and Brook Lopez were hot early. And by the way they were shooting, you kind of thought, oh, shit, Pacers in trouble again. This ain't about to look good. And that just was not the case. Just wasn't the case. Hot shooting and all from them, too. Their teammates didn't give them much. No. Pascal Siakam was more aggressive in this game than he was in the first, and he scored 30-plus in the first game. So shout out to Pascal Siakam for just consistently being that dude. You were that fucking dude in Toronto. You're that fucking dude now in Indiana. You just keep showing up, and I credit to you, brother. They still need more from Tyrese Halliburton. He's nowhere near. I mean, I just did a video on this, y'all. I told y'all. He ain't cutting mustard. He shot the ball way more effectively. He shot the 3 way better, but it wasn't enough. And granted, they didn't need him to win, but there's going to be a time they're going to need him to win. Having said all that, Bucks defense looked very off compared to the first game. And I was worried because if you remember in the last episode, guys, I told you, I was very curious to see what will fall off first, the defense or the shooting. I assumed the shooting would fall off first, and it was the defense that fell off, which if that happens, the Bucks ain't winning this series. So, having said all that, Pacers stayed aggressive with their pace, and if they can keep that up, they're going to beat this Bucks team because I noticed that this Bucks team is a little bit older and slower, not as a fleet of foot as they've technically been in the past couple years. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they address that because that pace was definitely giving Milwaukee hell. And if I was the Pacers, I would stay with it. Looking at that, though, like I said, great response from Indiana. You can pass up Siakam's 37 points. I believe 3 made threes. Damn. I mean, that tells you enough right there. All 5 starters were in double figures, and the bench gave you 23 points. You know, 3-point shot was falling for him. You know, that's obviously I spoke to Halliburton previously. The 3-point shot was falling for him. You got to give the Pacers credit. They were way more prepared for this game. The game plan was effective, and it seemed like the Bucks kind of rested on their laurels. Like after game 1, we bust their ass. We got them. You ain't got them. It's tied. You want to show up now. So, like I said, now Dame Lillard, 34 points, 6 made threes. Hell of a game from Dame. Brook Lopez, 22 points, 6 made threes. Hell of a game. Best shooting performance he'll probably have the rest of the postseason. Patrick Beverley. I always say this. If you're not giving me offense, please give me defense. He didn't give you shit last night. 5 points, 1 of 5 from the field, and defensively he was getting cooked. Horrible. Horrible. Indiana shot the 3-point ball better, and they out-rebounded the Bucks. So, it's going to be very interesting to see if Giannis can make it back for this series because he's going to be the deciding factor. If he can start crashing out those boards better, Pacers don't stand a chance. But with that shooting and all, the Bucks still lost the game. So, and they got blown out. You know, it looked a little bit uglier at the end, but it was bad. It was bad. Having said on that, we're going to continue further and go into Mavericks versus Clippers. This game, and I think I've been stressing the emphasis, you see my hashtag, get Luka some help. Luka this time got his teammates involved. And I've stated this countless times. I've said this around a bunch of friends and constituencies and around my wife. I feel like Luka Doncic is the European LeBron James. I know that their games were totally different when they first came out. As you look now, they both kind of play a similar game. A little bit more dribbling on Luka's hand, a little bit more ball dominance, but they're both ball dominant. Hell, I mean, I've seen LeBron for 20 years. I can tell you he's ball dominant. Be that as it may, Luka Doncic got his teammates involved early, got that ball movement, the ball pace was there. It was there. I mean, you got to give it to him. This kid is truly ascending. He'll probably end up the scoring champion. My guess is he'll probably end up a 3-time, 4-time MVP. But if he continues to play like he played a night ago, they're going to win this series, and they're going to go far in the postseason. The Mavericks' interior defense, which also was crucial and needed, was aggressive, showed up, phenomenal. Got to give them credit for that. The Clippers' interior defense was terry cloth. I mean, just soft. Just Pillsbury dope, like just soft. Not going to get it done. From a Tyronn Lue team, very surprising to see, very shocking. Going forward, Kyrie, active and aggressive. He's been a hell of a leader this year. He's been a standout player. And honestly, he's been the real MVP for the Mavericks because I don't think people realize if he just at any point bitched about not getting the ball or felt like things weren't going his way or felt like, he wasn't getting his just due or his credit, I strongly believe he probably would have caused issues and he probably wouldn't have been there and this team would not be in the situation they're in. Getting embarrassed and not making the playoffs last year, I think helped this team. So... and again, I must say this before I end any Mavericks segment. The Mavericks bench is fucking garbage. Luka, this game was still close. You can't keep leaving it on Luka's hands. Can any of y'all show up and just look like comparable, competent basketball players? If that happens, I guarantee you'll go to the second round. I guarantee you. With that being said, we're going to go now into our 32 teams in 13 days segment, even though it's no longer 13 days. It's now one more day before the draft. But today I got a little bit of a doozy for you. We're going to cover 4 teams today. Starting off on that list is the 11-6 Miami Dolphins. Very interesting year from the Miami Dolphins. Kind of fluky where, they started off hot, great. The weather was warm. They were playing at home, early in the season, looked good. And then once that weather got cold, and do understand, I mean below 46 degrees, as soon as that weather got cold, Tua was 0-7 in those temperatures, just so y'all know. As soon as that weather got low, defense, bad. And I think people don't really realize they did suffer with a lot of injuries early on. I hear Vic Fangio, catching hell because Vic Fangio, he's supposed to be a savior. You see that Dolphins defense? Well, they were suffered a shitload of injuries in the first half of the year. Bradley Chubb wasn't there. Jalen Ramsey wasn't there. And I'm expecting this team to be great, losing great players of that caliber. That's just not going to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they address the defense. And obviously with the departures they had this offseason, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Dolphins address this. Excuse me. Having said all that, Mike McDaniels is returning as head coach. Chris Greer, fourth year now GM. I'll touch on him in a little bit. Offensive coordinator Frank Smith. Anthony Weaver, first year defensive coordinator for this team. I must stress emphasis for Chris Greer. The pressure is on. The pressure is on. You picked Tua. You didn't pick Justin Herbert. And I get it. When you look back at that 2020 draft, you can't really argue with any of the quarterbacks. All of them were starters. All of them all the ones picked between the first, second round. For the most part, all of them were starters. All of them are playing well at a high level. Potential faces of the NFL now. So, I'm not looking at Tua's raw stats and saying garbage. What I'm looking at, though, is he can't take hits. We obviously know there's a concussion issue, which we all hope that, he stays, upright for that. And he can't play in cold weather. And this is the guy that you hitched your wagon to. So Chris Greer, the pressure's on. Got to win. And I'm not sure this year with all the departures they had and with the way that division's shaping up, I'm not sure they're going to win. Like I said, looking at their defensive rankings, they were 22nd, 10th in yards, 20th on third down, 8th on fourth down percentage, and red zone percentage, they were 28th, which was just atrocious. Second to last. Come on. I mean, needless to say, this defense is going to have to be addressed in the draft and in free agency, and we're going to touch on some of those moves shortly. Looking at their offense, they were ranked second in the NFL. They were first in passing, 7th in third down percentage, 28th in fourth down. You notice that 28th in fourth down on offense, 28th in red zone percentage. Just things that did not get noticed early in the year when they were blowing, when they put 70 on Denver and they were putting 40 on teams. It was things that were just not getting noticed, getting swept under the rug. Sweep. But now we know those things wound up rearing its head as the season played out. When they played good teams and when they got to the playoffs, you saw, oh yeah, they really can't stop anybody. Be that as it may, they only have $2 million in cap space, which clearly isn't going to be enough. They're going to have to definitely probably sit with that going into the rest of the year because not sure how many moves they're going to make, i.e. waiver wire outside of the draft. They have 6 draft picks going forward, 2 in the 5th round. Will Tua get that contract extension? It's going to be very interesting to see if he gets that contract. Tua, to me, I wouldn't personally give him the contract extension, but I think Chris Greer is kind of in a bind. He's in a situation because of where he drafted him, how high he was drafted, and what their future outlook is. Because let's be real, what is the plan outside of Tua Tagovailoa? There's really no plan. So I don't see them necessarily releasing him, but I see them possibly overpaying him and then regretting it a year or two later. Will the defense improve? Great question, because with Anthony Weaver, like I said, Vic Fangio caught hell. Didn't have a lot of those guys healthy. So it'll be interesting to see how they play. I know some of it with Fangio, they were bitching about his coaching style, him being a hard-ass, hard-nosed, old-school football player. Listen, a lot of guys came up like that. I know these new age players, some of them ain't. But last time I checked, Vic Fangio has appeared in 2 or 3 Super Bowls within the past 10 years. The Dolphins haven't. So keep that in mind. Can the running backs stay healthy? Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, good running backs, but damn, how many of you guys had them in fantasy football, or you seen them on the waiver wire, or you seen them injured, and you just realize damn, they're going to play good the first 6-7 weeks, but after that, I can't trust them. I have to get off this guy. So they're going to have to definitely address that position in the draft, I feel, because they don't really have a stable of running backs. They have 2 running backs who are decent that can't stay healthy, and that means you have no running back. So that being said, safety is going to be a low-key position of need. Cornerback is definitely going to be a position of need. Defensive tackle, obviously, we're losing Christian Wilkins, will be a position of need. And one final thing I wanted to touch on with them before I go into their free agency acquisitions and their draft visits. Jalen Waddle. Anybody, comment by all means, and let me know if I was wrong. But I do believe I've checked. I've checked twice today. Jalen Waddle has not gotten that 5th-year extension picked up yet, which I do find kind of shocking, being that he's a 12, 13, 1,400-yard receiver when healthy. Maybe it's the byproduct of paying Tyreek, 25 to 28 million, and it's going to cause them to not be able to pay 2 receivers. You just saw Philadelphia do it. There's plenty of other teams doing it. It's going to be very interesting to see how Jalen Waddle, his contract shapes out, what that may be with him and Tua. So Miami's definitely in a bind financially. They're going to have to spend some money and adjust that cap to create some room and to get guys to stay long term. Having said that, looking at their free agent acquisitions, brought in Jordan Poyer, safety for the Bills. Good safety. I like him. Former Pro Bowler, but a little bit long in the tooth now. 33 years old. Came off an injury. Not sure how that really helps you too much. I mean, maybe if he's healthy, it's great, but, Shaquille Barrett, good signing, solid signing I can agree with. I definitely agree with the Jonnu Smith signing. Getting him from Atlanta, formerly of Tennessee Titans fame. Also bringing in guard Isaiah Wynn, also bringing in cornerback Kendall Fuller, just highlighted names, to name a few. Losing Brandon Jones, as far as the departures, losing Brandon Jones. They lost Christian Wilkins, lost Robert Hunt, lost Andrew Van Ginkel. So they're going to have, they definitely have holes they have to fill. And the departures, don't forget, you don't have Raekwon Davis anymore. There isn't any more Xavier Howard. You don't have Jerome Baker, Emmanuel Ogbah. Good or bad, however you feel about him, Dolphins fans out there, he's going to. Deshaun Elliott, Cedric Wilson. So you look at this team, it doesn't seem like they have a ton of holes to fill, but I would stress emphasis to you that not only do they have holes to fill, but if they fuck around and find out, they might be a 9-win team next year. So, be that as it may, looking at their top 30 visits, a lot of tackles, a lot of corners, definitely some running backs, definitely some defensive ends they brought in. Obviously, you lose Christian Wilkins. Your running backs can't stay healthy. You lose some linebackers with Van Ginkel. You need to bring in guys. Some of the visits, guys they brought in for a visit, Tyler Guyton, Christian Boyd, tight end Eric All from Iowa, Quantez Stiggers, who you guys have been hearing me talk about ad nauseum, cornerback from the CFL, had 5 interceptions last season. Rasheed Allen, running back from Marshall. You also had Jerry and James, corner from Florida State. Go Noles. Also Jalen McMillan from Washington, wide receiver. Patrick Paul, tackle from Houston. And also Austin Booker from Kansas, defensive end. So you see it's a melting pot of what they're looking for, but they're trying to grab off a little bit of everything because they need a little bit of everything. This team definitely has holes, and I definitely feel like people are kind of overlooking the fact that the Bills, I get it. They don't have Stephon Diggs, so they're going to take a step back. They're still better right now than the Dolphins. They are. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Dolphins address a lot of these things, especially after the drafts. I can't wait till after tomorrow and address that. But yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. And how do you address the size and the lack of size on the defensive line too? That's going to be interesting to see them address. Leading in next, my hometown, my home favorite, my heart of hearts, my Philadelphia Eagles. Boy, oh boy. Can you say from being exalted and having exaltation and hopes about what could be to being at the bottom of the barrel and saying, damn, can this shit just end? I don't need to beat a dead horse without saying that defense was fucking atrocious last year. Just before I dive any further, Nick Sirianni returning. I will be commenting on that shortly. Nick Sirianni, obviously fourth-year head coach returning. GM Howie Roseman returning. First-year offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. First-year quasi defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. Having said all that, I want to get back to this damn defense. If you were like I are an Eagles fan and you watched this past season and you saw how fucking bad that defense was, You probably thought it was bad, but it probably wasn't as bad as I thought. They just, because of injuries and bad play and, no. No, don't make no excuses for them. It was fucking bad. 30th on defense, 26th in yards, 31st on third down, 25th on fourth down, and 30th in the red zone. You could talk to me all day about Nick Sirianni. You could talk to me all day about Jalen Hurts. Hell, you could say they need to run the ball more. When your defense cannot stop anyone, and understand this is throughout the season, so first 8-9 weeks, they were in the top 10. Just think about what I'm saying to y'all. First 8 or 9 weeks, they were in the top 10 of defense. As soon as after that Buffalo game ended, all hell broke loose and the wheels fell off. Buffalo exposed something. Credit to their coaching staff. They didn't win the game, but they won the war because they exposed so much within that game that they wound up setting this team back. And even though they were still in it quasi and they were still floating around, anybody who really knew they were out of it. Anybody who knew. And that defense is definitely going to have to improve if this team is going to be viable and back to their contending, former NFC Championship ways from 2 years ago. They're going to have to get that defense repaired. Having said all that, they have about $28 million in cap space. Howie with the flex, finessing that cap as usual. Shout out to Howie fucking Roseman. You do it again, the wizard. Draft picks, they got about 8 this year. 2 in the second round, 1 via the New Orleans Saints. It leads me into my point with Nick Sirianni. Everybody was like, they came up to me, yeah, damn, man, how'd you feel about Nick Sirianni? What'd you think? I mean, he definitely didn't do a good fucking job down the stretch. I felt like the pressure was getting to him. He definitely tried to make do with things and things didn't work out. And, here's the thing though, y'all. I'm not going to crucify a man for giving guys their first time and, their first shot at the gun and say, hey, you know what? Let's see how you do. Sean Desai pickup didn't work. Okay, that's flat out didn't work. Matt Patricia should stay far the fuck away from any good football team as far as the defensive coordinator. He has no idea what he's doing. And Brian Johnson, the experiment didn't work. Now, granted, you look at the offensive numbers. You were 7th in the league in offense, 8th in yards, 16th in passing yards, 3rd on third down, 1st on fourth down percentage, and 9th in the red zone. Johnson got fired for how the team offensively played down the stretch. But I would tend to say if the defense hadn't have been that bad, maybe some of those games you pull out. I don't know. He's no longer here. And obviously, he deserves some blame too. You weren't giving DeAndre Swift the ball down the stretch. You gave DeAndre Swift, Smitty, and AJ Brown the ball at weird ass times that didn't make sense, that just conflicted with any logical understanding of how offense could be ran. And I get it. Again, first year offensive coordinator. I understand. That being said, familiarity and continuity was what Nick Sirianni was trying. That's why it didn't work. So you're going to have to go a little bit outside the box, i.e. Kellen Moore. Let's see how he does. It's going to be very interesting to see how him and Jalen bond together. Jalen, as you guys know, spoke on sponge mode and being in a learning mode and allow his coaches to facilitate and build the game plan. And then he understands, installs it, and then replicates it on the field. So that way in the summer, fall, and later in the winter, hopefully in January to February, he can replicate this all the way through. Having said all that, I was interested to see with the fluke and the slide, was the slide that they had last year, was it a fluke or was it something that is a sign of bigger issues? So I did some deep diving, y'all. And since 2010, 8 teams, the Eagles being the 8th, were the first. Those 8 teams since 2010 were the 8 teams that lost their first playoff game after an 8-2 or 10-1 start, which got me to thinking. Everybody was so quick to say fire Sirianni, because Roseman had a conversation with Belichick, and people that were within the know just assume, Nick's gone, because he talked to Bill Belichick. Howie and Jeffrey Lurie are pissed with him. I'm pretty sure they were pissed with how things went. But you don't fire a guy who, coincidentally, and you can Google this, right now, as the coach, 4 years in, has a better winning percentage than Andy Reid did 4 years in. So, anyway, I did a deep dive and dug a little further. I wanted to know, what did those teams do, all 8 of those teams, what did they do the year after that epic collapse the season prior? Interesting enough, out of the 8 teams, believe four of those teams had winning records. 3 made the playoffs. 2 went on deep playoff runs. And we're talking about the 2015 Arizona Cardinals, 2016 New England Patriots, who went on to win the Super Bowl. I'm saying all this to say, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, this is definitely a sign that not only you can bounce back. History kind of says, yeah, you're probably going to bounce back and make the playoffs. Barring any, God forbid, any unforeseen injuries or calamities, things like that, you'll probably make the playoffs again. And then at that point, if this defense is fixed, we'll see how you can contend. Like I said, so if any Eagles fans out there that were fretting and just letting you know, I've done some research on that, and chances are they'll probably make the playoffs again and be in contention in this thing again. Having said all that, can Jalen Hurts bounce back? Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate 2 years ago. Last year, 15 turnovers, fumbles, and interceptions, so definitely not good. However, that being said, we all know that the man was on a bulky knee. Everyone plays injured, so we try not to make any excuses for anybody, but nonetheless, he played through injury, still made the Pro Bowl as well, second time making the Pro Bowl. This kid is just consistently proven that he's the leader of this team, and he's the leader of this organization, and I'm glad that he's the quarterback. I'm glad that we have the weapons that we have around him and that they have the opportunity to really do some damage this year, because I really think him working with Pep Hamilton this offseason, meeting up with quarterback coach Doug Nussmeier, meeting up with offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. This is all going to be crucial to this team competing and being valuable in January again. Because without it, there's no way in hell we're going to win, especially with those horrible ass numbers on defense. It's not going to work. So definitely to see that from Jalen is huge. Definitely see that ascension. He almost had a 4,000-yard passing season last year. So very interested to see how he just keeps progressing. Having said that, who the hell is the third wide receiver for Philadelphia? I mean, your third leading wide receiver had 164 yards. So that's definitely got to be an address. Quez Watkins wasn't the dude. They brought out Julio Jones. Shout out to Julio. He was serviceable for what he was. Older receiver, body. Scored 3 touchdowns, I believe, with us last year. Shout out to Julio. Olamide Zaccheaus, 1 touchdown. Had 1 game over 80 yards. Great special teams guy, but didn't really give us what we needed from that third wide receiver. And again, this is one of the things that hampered our offense. If you had that third wide receiver, I can only imagine how much deadlier that offense would be. So very interested to see how they address that going into the draft. They're going to have to address cornerback. James Bradbury was just a walking dumpster fire last year. I think anybody who watched football or knows football, if you read the numbers, he gave up about 700 yards in passing yards on defense last year, which is fucking horrendous. So yeah, and again, we don't know if that was Sean Desai's defense or was that a sign that James Bradbury just wasn't good anymore. He definitely was slower. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all could watch him. He didn't look great in recovery speed, so I tend to think it was a little bit of both. So again, addressing cornerback in this draft, very important. That's why you hear some of the rumors now that they're moving up for Quinyon Mitchell. I'm going to be completely honest with you. That's possible. Pay attention, and any of y'all, pay attention over the past 4 or 5 years. Look at who Howie Roseman brings in for those top 30 visits. The first couple players are typically the guys that they typically are going to draft. That's usually what they're going to draft. Just to let you know, Terrion Arnold was in there before Quinyon Mitchell. But again, Vic Fangio has say-so over this defense, so be interested to see how they divide all that up and set that up. Defensive end is definitely going to be a need. Josh Sweat's technically on a one-year, $10 million prove-it deal. Nolan Smith's a young guy. Got to see what he's doing. Brandon Graham, this is going to be his last year. So defensive end is definitely going to be a position to need. Without stating, you're going to have to address that. Looking at how Philadelphia, especially drafts and recruits free agency-wise through the trenches, I have no doubt that they're going to address these things in free agency. It's just a question of who they grab. And last but not least, linebacker. If you're an Eagles fan, let me just say, I'm gonna go further. If you're a casual fan, but if you're an Eagles fan, I don't even need to fucking stress. Linebacker. Get a fucking linebacker. They brought Laitu Latu in for a visit. Interested to see how that works out. I like him a lot, but he's more of an edge rusher. So, but they need Edrin Cooper. Again, they need linebackers. I'll take any one of them dudes over Nicholas Morrow or Zach Cunningham And I can't even shit on Nakobe Dean because, hell, I don't even know what the hell he's going to give me. He was injured all of last year. So, And another thing I wanted to touch on too, in reference to the Birds, Cam Jurgens. Cam Jurgens has big shoes to fill. Obviously, Jason Kelsey's no longer there. He just retired. I just read on WashingtonPhiladelphiaEagles.com, they gave Cam Jurgens Jason Kelsey's former locker, because he's obviously taking the mantle now. He's going to be the guy running the offense, the center. And Jason Kelsey, obviously, shout out to you, Kels. You are the best fucking center ever in Philadelphia Eagles history. No disrespect to the great Chuck Bednarik, but in my generation, for what I've seen, Hank Franley, fuck that. You're that guy. You. That being said, Cam Jurgens has been learning from this man for 2 years. Cam Jurgens was brought into this team because Jason Kelsey sat in with Jeff Stoutland, and Howie Roseman has said, this is the type of guy that could replace me and help run this offense. That being said, if Cam Jurgens comes in and plays the level that I think he can play in, not only will the play of this offensive line continue, it's going to give teams fits. That being said, let's look at their free agency acquisitions and departures, and boy, oh boy, did they spend this free agency. Saquon Barkley, obviously biggest acquisition. You grabbed Bryce Huff from the Jets, which was kind of a quasi, wasn't essentially a trade, but you essentially got rid of Hassan Reddick and brought in Bryce Huff. Most snaps that Bryce Huff played in his career and his life in the NFL was last year. He had 10 sacks, high pressure rate, but very interesting to see because he's not really a great pass coverage defensive end / linebacker, and that's the reason why you kind of got off Reddick, because he was older, going to be expensive, and couldn't play pass coverage. So whatever. Maybe they liked that style of rusher. They just felt like Hassan Reddick was going to be too much money and they weren't going to do it. I don't know. Howie, move a little funny with that shit sometimes. With that being said, running linebacker Zach Bourne from the Saints, Paris Campbell, wide receiver, formerly from the Colts. My man, safety returning C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who should have took the damn deal a year ago, but things happen for a reason. Now he got his money, and I felt like Reed Blankenship missed him. I felt like the defense suffered without him being there. His playmaking ability, his ball hawk ability. So definitely happy to see him back. Matt Hennessy, offensive interior guard from the Falcons. They brought him in. Definitely a good pickup, rotational piece that's been a starter, solid, contributing offensive lineman. Also in Devin White. I think, and there's other guys, Devontae Parker, Will Grier, backup quarterback. I feel like Devin White has a chance to be the most low-key, underrated best signing they have. Ride with me for a second. Didn't get the money in Tampa. Played a little bit of a malcontent. Got a little pissy. Bit of a pain in the ass on the way out. And if you notice, he still played, at 80 tackles, couple sacks. Didn't have the great year that he's typically put up past, from past seasons. But I feel like he knows this year he has to prove it. And he knows that if he plays well, he's either going to get the money from Philly or somewhere else. I will hope it be Philly, because if he plays well, damn it, we need a linebacker like that. And Devin White's been good when he's played well. When he's been healthy, he's played well. He's battled some injuries, so it's very interesting to see how they're going to address this. Obviously, most of these guys they grab, when they're healthy, they're good. Only a few of them have injury concerns, but for the most part, the Eagles definitely realized after that slide they could not go into it with the same roster as the year prior, and adjustments were going to have to be made, and it seems like they've made them. And we'll see after the draft how they continue to make them. Departures, you had Kevin Byard, Hassan Reddick, obviously, as I touched on, DeAndre Swift, who I felt like, would have been a 1,400-yard back had Brian Johnson given the fucking ball more, whatever. Quez Watkins, as I touched on, departed. Olamide Zaccheaus is gone. Sua Opeta is gone. Jack Driscoll is now with the Dolphins. Marcus Mariota with Washington now, he's gone. Nicholas Morrow with the Bills, good riddance. That was really, for the Eagles, it was a good offseason. If that was your only losses and you brought in Saquon, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Bryce Huff, a Devin White, a Matt Hennessy, who I think is going to wind up being a good guard for them, and Zach Bourne, who is a good rotational linebacker for the Saints, gets pressures, gets interceptions. Decent offseason for the Birds. But like I said, it all remains to be seen how it all puts together and how it gels, and if it could gel to keep Nick Sirianni and team his job. So looking at their top 30 visits, I think it's pretty safe to say where Howie and team are looking. They brought in 7 cornerbacks. Terrion Arnold, as I previously touched on, Quinyon Mitchell was not on the list. He was a late visit, guys. He was a very late visit. And when I say late, I mean literally as a day or so ago when the visit window was like about to shut permanently where no more visits could be done. Having said all that, Caitlin Carson was in for a visit as far as defensive backs. Cooper DeJean, Jerry Jones from Florida State, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Andrew Phillips from Kentucky, and DeCameron Richardson from Mississippi State. So clearly, as I stated, your best corner right now is 33 years old, and that's Darius Slay. You're going to have to get a corner. I'm not sure if the young guys they had in the rotation were necessarily great pieces or ready to step up and play, but, it's going to be very interesting to see how they address that position. They're definitely going corner. 5 edge rushers they've looked at: Jalix Hunt, Adisa Isaac, you have Marshawn Nealon, Leitu Latu, as I previously touched on, who I think is probably the best edge rusher in this draft, and Chop Robinson from Penn State. They've looked at 4 offensive tackles. Obviously, I think that replacing Lane Johnson within the future, within the next 2 to 3 years, is going to be a thing. And it's not because Lane Johnson's played well. He's still been playing at a Pro Bowl, All-Pro level. You just know that from his own comments, 2026, that might be the year. That's 2 years from now. You always want to have more horses in the stable, especially with the Eagles. If you follow the Eagles, you know the Eagles. Defensive, offensive line, they always keep it stable. Always keep it stable. So, be that as it may, they've looked at 4 guards. Some names you probably heard of: Cooper Beebe, Brandon Coleman, Christian Mahogany, Zach Zinter. Interestingly enough, you heard me speak on the 3rd wide receiver spot, and they've only brought in 3 wide receivers. Brendan Rice, you've heard me talk about extensively on a ton of draft visits, son of Jerry Rice. Anaya Smith, wide receiver from Texas A&M, and also Johnny Wilson, another Seminole that they brought in. Big body, 6'6", 6'7" wide receiver. So, interesting to see that, 3 wide receivers, 7 cornerbacks, kind of leans. You kind of see that the first couple rounds are going to be leaning corner, edge rusher, interior line, wide receiver. And last but not least tidbit, as far as the Eagles, when it comes to the top 30 visits, the only running back to come in was Marshawn Lloyd from USC. So, I think Howie kind of told us, linebacker-wise as well. Edrin Cooper was in for a visit. I kind of referenced that a little bit. And Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. So, yeah, one of those guys is definitely getting picked up, and it's definitely going to be needed if the Eagles want to make the push and get back to prominence that they were 2 years ago. Coming up around the bend, we got the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, 11-6, surprising Cleveland Browns, who, all in all, y'all can be honest, once Deshaun Watson went down, y'all said they fucking done. I thought they were too, and they played great. Shout out to the Browns. Shout out to Kevin Stefanski. Shout out to Jim Schwartz for getting that team prepared and having that team ready week in and week out. GM Andrew Berry making the acquisitions that he's needed from the Philadelphia Eagles. Shout out to Andrew Berry. They also brought in offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, who was fired from the Bills a year ago and was brought in. And looking at it, I mean, this team is good. This team is on the verge to compete, but there's definitely some things that they're going to have to address if they want to be significant and be major players in the AFC playoff picture. I'll start by touching on their defensive stats. If you watch their defense, anybody with eyes can see their defense was elite last year. Reading the raw numbers is even crazier. 13th in defense, 1st in yards, 1st on 3rd down, 1st on 4th down. Ironically, though, they were 32nd in red zone percentage. Now, I kind of get it. Maybe that's because fucking stifling teams, shutting them down, putting the clamps on them, so it's causing them to not necessarily be as agile or as ready as they would be. So definitely the pressure and the defense has been there. Offensively, 10th in rushing, 16th in yards, 19th in passing, 29th in 3rd down percentage, 10th in 4th down percentage, 15th in red zone. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they address their offense, because we know some of this was injuries, not having Deshaun Watson, having P.J. Walker come in, having Joe Flacco come in. Some of those numbers suffered because of that, but leads me to believe Deshaun Watson's going to have to stay healthy for this team to reach the heights they need to reach. They were penalized 115 times for 897 yards, which I know for some people you probably think that's very minute. Like, why the hell would you even bring that up? When you're giving up almost 1,000 yards and you have the defense like this, if the offense shows up, this is a 13-win team. So just keep that in mind. Cap space-wise, they have around $13 million this year, but that does go up to over $17 million in 2025, and I'll tell you about that in a little bit. They have 6 draft picks going into this draft, 2 in the 6th round, and no first-round pick. Be that as it may, can Deshaun Watson stay healthy? That's really what it's going to come down to. This is year 3, so there's no more excuses for him. He's got to produce. Can the Browns make enough noise? And I believe they can, but you know, if Deshaun Watson's not healthy and you have Jameis Winston this year, and I see they also grabbed Tyler Huntley, it's going to be very weird to see how they definitely address that position. Because if he's not healthy, I don't feel like they're going to win 11 games like they did a year ago. Even as great as that defense is, I just don't see it happening again. The offense has to match the defense's play. Just that simple. Like I said, this team could be a 13-win team, but when you're giving away that many yards, especially the offensive yards, penalty yards, you know, false starts, and it just stupid shit. You know, it causes you to lose games. And again, they could be on the cusp of being one of those perennial top-seeded AFC teams without these issues if they can just tighten that up. Can Nick Chubb return to form? Nick Chubb, you know, horrific injury last year. We all pulling for him. All hope that he comes back fresh and his normal self. But we all know he's getting close to 30, if not 30 already. And when these injuries happen, running backs just aren't the same. So I'll be interested to see how Nick Chubb responds, if he can become that guy that he once was or still maintain that level, you know. Kevin Stefanski. You know, Kevin, a lot of talk about, you know, some of these coaches I'm going over today, the Nick Sirianni's, next coach will be Mike McCarthy. We're going to get on them Cowboys in a second. You know, a lot of pressure. And Stefanski actually was dealing with this last year, so this is not new. Any of you Browns fans or people out there that are watching this segment or see me covering this, know that this isn't new news. Kevin Stefanski's been on the hot seat for about, I'd say, roughly a year or two now. He's going to have to show cause. You know, he did well with Joe Flacco until they got blown out against the Texans in the playoff games. But if he can't get it done, or if this offense goes through the laws that they went through where they just look stagnant in the middle of the year like they did last year, he's getting fired. It's just too much is expected. You're paying this quarterback this much money. We're paying the offensive lineman. We're paying we're paying Myles Garrett. We're about to pay more of these defensive guys. Why in the hell are you not where we need you to be? So it's on step of Kevin Stefanski to get it done. I touched on that cap space. You guys heard me reference a little bit ago that in 2025, the cap space jumps up to $17 million over the cap. That is correct because they owe Deshaun Watson $63 million. Now, to keep this in context, guys, if he is cut before June 1st, that is $136 million that the Browns have to pay out. Gargantuan fucking amount of money. This is arguably, for a quarterback, one of the best contract, if not one of the best contracts ever. For a team, one of the stupidest decisions a team could ever put themselves in. I highly doubt any quarterback will get this type of contract ever again. Having said all that, to give you context on why this cap hit is so significant and why this team has to do something this year, the closest cap hits are Myles Garrett, $19 million, and Denzel Ward, $24 million. So even those two combined aren't at Deshaun Watson's cap number. This is, you know, it's just looking like 2024 has to be a year where they make a deep run, because if not, they're going to have to blow this shit up a little bit next year, 2025, and it's kind of start anew. Browns fans, I know you love Amari Cooper. I think Amari Cooper's a dope wide receiver. I've liked him since he was in Oakland. He might be a cap casualty in 2025. You know, whether you cut him before or after June 1st, it's $7 million that you own. So is Jake Conklin as well. So there's going to be some interesting decisions that the Browns are going to have to make going into the offseason next year. So it's going to be imperative for this team to win and win now. And like I said, I don't know. Kansas City, Baltimore, Cincinnati. It's going to be interesting. Having said all that, looking at their free agent acquisitions, they were able to acquire Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver, in a big trade with the Broncos. Kind of fell out of favor in Denver. You know, had the big blow up with Steve Smith, as y'all know, that went viral. You know, kind of seemed like he was a guy who needed new scenery. Hope that everything works out for him. Hope that he could progress with Deshaun Watson and this offense, because I really do think that this offense is tailor-made for a guy like him to succeed. They brought in Nyheim Hines, Jordan Hicks. They brought in, as I previously touched on, Jameis Winston as a backup quarterback, as well as Tyler Huntley. Not shocked that they brought in both. Tyler Huntley has shown promise. You know, he helped get a team to the playoffs with the Ravens a couple years ago. Jameis Winston, solid when he had Sean Payton coaching him, but all in all, hasn't really done much. You know, his claim to fame is thrown for 4,000 or 5,000 yards and 30 interceptions. So, you know, it's a lot to desire there. But Dante Foreman, Devin Bush, linebacker who left Seattle a year ago, he's there now. And Cade York, former kicker of the Giants, is there. So definitely a lot of acquisitions made by the Browns that you can see they were trying to definitely upgrade this team. Looking at their departures, Kareem Hunt is gone, Jakeem Grant is gone, Deron Harmon, safety, is gone, Joe Flacco obviously is gone, Sione Takitaki is gone. Yeah, so, definitely they got holes to address. They got to win this year. I can't stress emphasis enough. Looking at that cap situation, looking at this roster, if they don't win this year, they're going to have to blow it up. Hell, they may have to blow it up, win or lose. So, nonetheless, looking at rounding up their top 30 visits for their draft, ultimately they brought in a little bit of everything in, kind of trying to leave no stone unturned. Brought in 3 wide receivers, though. And keep this in mind, they just traded for Jerry Jeudy about a couple weeks to a month ago, and they're still looking at wide receivers. So 3 of them have been in for a visit. Ladietrick, Tulu Griffin, Troy Franklin, and Malachi Corley, and also Lad McConkey, has been in for visits. They've also brought in 2 tight ends, interestingly enough, Eric All and Jatavian Sanders. And running backs, they brought in my man Trey Benson from Florida State and Aiden Robbins. And cornerback-wise, interestingly enough, they only brought in 1 corner, and that was DeCameron Richardson. So, kind of seems like offensive tackle and wide receiver is where they might be going for the Browns. They brought in 4 offensive tackles, 4 defensive tackles, Michael Hall, McKinley Jackson. You had Tavondre Sweat, and you also had Jawan Briggs. So, like I said, a little bit all over the board, but if you really pay attention, defensive line and wide receiver is kind of mainly where they're looking at. That's probably the first 2 rounds what they're looking to address. So, it's going to be a very impactful and very serious year for the Browns, and very interested to see how Deshaun Watson and his team responds and if Stefanski can help get these guys into prominence. And last but not least, we're going to wrap up today's segment of 32 teams in 13 days with the Dallas Cowboys. How about them Cowboys? Yeah, how about them? 12-5. That playoff game. Woo! Damn. Anyway, you have Mike McCarthy coming back and returning head coach. GM/owner Jerry Jones, obviously. The man on his team, so he ain't going nowhere. De facto GM. Offensive coordinator returning Brian Schottenheimer. And first year and only on a 1-year deal, defensive coordinator Mike Zimmer. Very interested to see. I'll dive into that in a second. Looking at their offensive and defensive ranks, we're going to start on offense. Cowboys offense with Mike McCarthy. I mean, hell, even with Jason Garrett, they were obviously effective. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at here. First in offense, 5th in yards, 2nd on 3rd down, 9th and 4th down percentage, 14th in the red zone, which I think was one of the reasons why they lost that game in Dallas. They couldn't punch it in the red zone against Philly. They're not a good situational football team, and it showed, and that's one of the things I wanted to highlight too. Red zone efficiency on offense was bad. When you're at 14th, it means you're average. You're not really great, which means, 1-yard line, your tight end's knee is hitting the ground before you can cross the line. Your quarterback, fumbles a snap before you can dive in for a touchdown. Little dumb shit like that is what cost you. Defensively, they were 5th. Again, outstanding defensive year. 5th in yards. Interestingly enough, though, everybody was quick to talk about how great the defense was. And, me being an Eagles fan and a fan seeing this team consistently, I said, there's some things lacking. Outside of Michael Parsons and maybe, some spot plays there from Gilmore or the defensive line, they're not really that good. To further, explain my point and to elaborate, 14th and 3rd down, 18th on 4th down, 19th in the red zone. Situational football, bad. Not good enough to beat the teams that you need, the elite teams, to win those games. That's why when you played Green Bay, they destroyed you in those down and distance situations. Heaved it over your head and you had no answer. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they address the defense in this draft. It's definitely a need. Mike Zimmer. Mike Zimmer was helping coach, he was helping Deion Sanders in Buffalo. With the Colorado Buffaloes. And their defense was atrocious. So I'm assuming because of familiarity and Jerry Jones knowing him for a long time and, his history and his tenure as being a defensive coordinator, he was good. Because I don't know if anybody noticed, let's just remember Mike Zimmer's last stop a couple years ago, The Vikings defense was a walking atrocity when he left. His call to fame was defense, and they were the worst defensive team in the league. Hence, that's why Brian Flores is there now with Kevin O'Connell, and they're better. Like I said, maybe it's a familiarity move. We'll see how it works out. They only have $6 million in cap space, so Cowboys fans digging in Jerry's ass about, making the moves with Dak's contract and all that. All that had to be done, still having to pay CD and Micah. It wasn't no way y'all was going to be effective in free agency. So if people try to get on you, let them know. Y'all never really had the money in the first place to make the moves. Having said all that, looking at the draft picks, they got 7 draft picks going into this draft, 2 of them in the 7th round. I suspect typically Jerry is a mover and shaker in the draft. I expect him to make some draft day moves. He's going to have to kind of replace all the holes that he has on his team this year. Having said that, can Mike McCarthy survive another year? I personally don't think he will. I think he almost got fired this offseason, and Bill Belichick almost became the coach of the team. But Jerry just didn't feel like he wanted to pay Bill all that money and pay 2 head coaches, and especially one not being there kind of sucks. So very interesting to see, but I'm not sure about Mike McCarthy lasting another year. It's going to be very interesting to see how that works out. Another tidbit, will Dak Prescott be there in 2025? Dak has been the staple and the epitome of what the Cowboys wanted from the quarterback position. Clean cut, cookie cutter, some definition, some walks of life, corny, wherever you want to categorize it. He's been a shining example. He's gotten a contract. He's gotten a big contract. He's playing this year, second highest contract, value contract. I believe it's 59 or 60 million off the top of my head in the NFL this year. Having said all that, I think this might be his last year. I know Jerry said that he's in the plans. I know that. Jerry has to quantify this. You're paying Dak. You don't have a running back. You still got to pay CeeDee Lamb. You still got to pay Micah Parsons. You still haven't even made all the other acquisitions you need to make. How is all this going to work? I think Jerry sometimes gets caught up into that P.T. Barnum thing where, he got y'all. He got y'all by the balls. He got a lot of people by the balls. Hey, step right up. Check this out. The Dallas Cowboys are here to play. And if you ever notice, the tickets are getting sold, asses are getting put in seats, for lack of better words, but their wins aren't following. A lot of, we're all in. And this is the first year in my life that all in football didn't mean all in. Because Jerry changed his definition, because Jerry knew he had the fucking money or the time or the wherewithal to really do it, because he didn't want to repay Dak another huge contract, and he still got to pay 2 more young guys. But it was interesting to see his press conference a day ago and to hear him say he wants to see guys play for it because, he's been criticized about paying guys too early and guys not living up to the contract. Well, I got news for you, Jerry. Dak's been a staple in your offense. CeeDee Lamb's your best wide receiver. Micah Parsons is a generational talent. Fuck around and find out, and you'll lose 1, if not 2 of those guys, if not all 3. I doubt all 3, but one of them definitely is leaving. I tend to think it's the quarterback. Who is your starting running back? I mean, if there's any question that you think they might draft a running back, I'm here to tell you, don't worry. Dallas Cowboys will be drafting a running back this year. Rico Dowdle is not the answer. I can promise you. Who is the 3rd wide receiver for the Cowboys? Brandon Cooks gave him turkey. He was turkey gravy last year. He was dog shit. I don't even know if you could quantify it. He had a 100-yard game late in the year. All of that. Gallup got released. He was a bum. Just bad. They didn't really have, just like the Eagles, just like some of these other teams I've mentioned, they don't have a 3rd wide receiver. So it'd be interesting to see how they address that in this draft. How would the offensive line respond? Tyron Smith's gone. Tyler Biadasz is gone. That means your center and your right tackle are gone. So very interested to see how that works. Looking at their free agency track, looking at their arrivals or lack of them and departures. Looking at their arrivals, linebacker Eric Kendricks, running back Royce Freeman. And departures, Dorrance Armstrong, role player. Tyler Biadasz, center. Dante Fowler, defensive end, role player. Neville Gallimore, defensive tackle, role player. Stephon Gilmore, starting corner for them last year. Jonathan Hankins, role player, defensive tackle, run stopper, gone. J-Ron Kearse, free agent. Tony Pollard, Tennessee. Tyron Smith, Jets. They got holes to fill. And at Cowboys, I feel y'all pain. Jerry selling the bill of goods. Don't believe him. Y'all going to be doing a lot of drafting. I doubt y'all going to be getting rid of more picks. Y'all probably going to be acquiring more. Because Jerry know. All in on the young guys, all in on this team, all in. You won 12 games the past 2 years. There's a good chance you could possibly do it again. The only way you don't is if you don't make the acquisitions you need in this draft to really fortify this team, to give confidence. Because no, I'm being honest with you. It's probably the first time in a while Cowboys fans are being real with themselves and looking at this and saying, oh shit. Rounding this up though, looking at their top 30 visits. They brought in a little bit of everybody. Obviously, when you have that many holes, you want to leave no stone unturned. I'm going to just, instead of going through every last damn name, I'm going to just give you a roundabout and let you know what they've done. They've brought in 6 linebackers, 8 running backs, 8 running backs, 4 offensive tackles, 1 defensive tackle, 3 interior linemen, 1 edge rusher, 1 receiver. And ironically, the wide receiver is Malachi Corley, who I think would be a great third wide receiver for them. Yeah, they're drafting a running back. You know, Trey Benson's been in for a visit. Jonathan Brooks, Bucky Irvin from Oregon, Rasheen Ali, from Marshall. They're drafting a running back. They clearly know Rico Dowdle ain't it, and they ain't bullshitting you. They know he ain't it. 6 linebackers. Junior Colson from Michigan's been in for a visit. Trevin Wallace from Kentucky. Edgerrin Cooper, who I think he was in for the Eagles. I just say he's been for everybody's team. Peyton Wilson from NC State, former Florida State Seminole. I mean, you don't have Van Der Esch anymore. Micah is coming up on that last year in a year. You got to make moves. See, Jerry was selling them tickets, y'all, because he knew, like everybody, it was prescient for him to make these moves to get this team replenished, because he's basically saying to y'all, we're going all in with this roster because next year we're going to have a whole new damn team. So, be that as it may, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Cowboys make their moves and plan accordingly. But they're definitely going to have to make huge adjustments to be where they want to be again, and to get out of the second round. Because, again, you ain't been to a Super Bowl since, you know, you played the Steelers in Super Bowl 31. It's been over 25 years. It's been a long while. It's getting there. So, be that as it may, tomorrow we will go over the teams who made the divisional round, as I stated, the conference championship, and also the Super Bowl teams, just to finish up everything. Obviously, tomorrow being draft day, hit you with a ton of football coverage to start the day. We'll also touch on the NBA games from tonight as well, discuss those, give it a nice little brief segment. I may actually do some shorts for those, just because there's so much NFL coverage. I want to kind of just like make sure it's all in there and that you're getting as much as you possibly can. Don't forget as well, I'm doing a live stream tomorrow after the draft to discuss the first round. And I told you day 2, I'll be doing a stream as well to discuss those picks. As always, like, share, and subscribe. I thank you guys for always watching and listening. And thank you. And I love you. And take care. And enjoy these games tonight, NBA games. And get ready for the draft, guys. Take care and enjoy.